Good evening. We're live on YouTube. I'm Faye. Thank you for joining me on this channel. Remember, if you want to watch more such videos, please subscribe and click on the bell icon and tell your friends about it as well. But today we're going to deal with something very important and something that shouldn't be sort of ignored because of the larger COVID health crisis that we're going through in this country. 12 people are dead in Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh because of a gas leak from the LG chemicals factory that was in that place. Now, visuals that have emerged from that incident are shocking. People just collapsing on either side of the street, animals dead. There was a visual that I did see of a motorcycle where the paint had corroded off because of the air around it. It sort of gives us an idea of how deadly this really was and what sort of impact it would have had on the people, on their lungs, on the insides of their body. Children are, have taken ill. Over 200 people are in hospital, and we don't know what sort of an impact this will have on these bodies in the days to come. If they were pregnant women, small children, what sort of deformities will this cause in the future? We don't know. What we do know is that there is a history, or there is precedent with the Bhopal gas tragedy that happened in India as well, which is why we have to ask the question today, in spite of what we learned in Bhopal, how come there have been no arrests whatsoever in Visakhapatnam even now? 12 people are dead. There's a vague FIR that has been filed and the police has made no arrests. Should we be demanding arrests? We also saw today there were protests that happened outside of the factory as villagers got together and demanded justice. Why is it that these villagers are having to demand justice alone? And why is it that the rest of the country isn't standing with them right now? Joining me on this conversation, Karuna, who's a lawyer and a very important voice at this point, because she has been fighting for the case of the Bhopal gas tragedy victims for this entire time. Ms. Neerja Chowdhury is a very senior journalist who's covered human rights problems for many, many decades and is a very keen voice on the matter. We'll also have Gali Nataraja join us from Hyderabad. He's been reporting on the matter from the ground, and we'll have him come in as soon as he's able to join us. But for now, ladies, thank you for agreeing to be part of this conversation. Ms. Nundy, I'll start with you. 0 arrests so far. Is this how it's supposed to play out?
I think the real politic of it seems to presume that this is the way it's supposed to play out. This is a little bit the way it played out after the Bhopal gas disaster. We don't call it the tragedy because it was completely man-made. Warren Anderson was essentially whisked out of the country, and so that they could evade criminal liability. We have a vivid memory of this still, because until his death, he remained a free man living in his palatial bungalow in Connecticut, and nothing happened. Now, in the present case, not only should there be immediate arrests, in the initial FIR, 304A, which is the provision they use for traffic accidents, but in addition, 300 Part 2, I beg your pardon, which is culpable homicide not amounting to murder, have to be in the FIR, because your investigation has to happen along those lines. And initially, you have to put in all the provisions that might be relevant. Of course, you're right, Ms. D'Souza, that the arrests must happen, because I'm not saying that you keep them in jail. At this point, I'm all for a lot of people being out on bail. It's difficult, to escape in any case. But bail terms must be set, right? Why have no arrests been made? It's incredible to me. The second thing, I think, which is also fundamental, is that a committee has been set up by government. And that committee appears to be looking for negligence. Let us be very clear. When you store hazardous substances, the legal standard after the oleum gas leak case, which was, and the stronger, I'm sorry, my electricity is but the stronger standards after Bhopal was set, which is that if you have a hazardous substance that escapes, then you are strictly liable, that negligence is not required. And this is so that if you are dealing in hazardous substances and you are making those profits, then you absolutely have to. take all the precautions. If you can't take those precautions, don't run that industry. So why is the government committee looking for negligence? This is extremely troubling. And also, I'm glad that Mr. Jagan Reddy has announced a payout, that the chief minister announced an immediate payout. But why has this money not been demanded of the company? Why did the Green Tribunal have to be set in? So they have to put out a significant amount of compensation without prejudice to the claims.
Right, and Ms. Nundy, I'll give you a moment to just figure out what happened with the lights. But in the meantime, let me just take this to Neerja Chowdhury. Ms. Chowdhury, thank you for joining us. Obviously, something has gone horribly wrong. That's besides the point. I mean, we've had villagers come out today and protest against what is going on, why they haven't received any justice and why no one has been arrested. Do you believe that right now the police is dragging its feet?
Obviously, because the least that the government should have done was to arrest people, to fix culpability. Of course, will be proved, but accountability. Then you can go on for investigation, what happened, and so on. So, the questions that are coming to your mind these days are: is Indian life becomes so cheap, and is that signal you are giving to the world community? Of course, what happened. I remember so vividly what happened in 1984, that December 22. Those days, Faye were also Indira Gandhi's assassination, the anti-Sikh riots, followed by this horrible Bhopal tragedy, gas tragedy, 15,000 people dead, thousands, 500,000, I remember, affected by it. And even till today, they were affected. The deaths that took place in Bhopal, large number were of those people who had been affected in 1984. They were more vulnerable. So you're absolutely right in asking those questions. Who is going to find out the impact that it's had on young children, on pregnant women, the child in the womb, others, the elderly, who may have been affected and may be affected for all time to come in the, for the rest of their lives? Is the government putting something in place to make sure this is done? Number one. Number two, to make sure that other LGs are not waiting to happen all over the country in the lockdown, that precautions are taken, that preemptive measures get put into place. Somewhere, your lives of your people have got to matter. They don't matter today. That's the impression that's coming. Whether it's the migrants or this, every day is a new tragedy. I mean, it's very painful, really, Faye, the way the governments are going about it. They need all our support at a time like this, of course. But, the water is going above your head now. And villagers are going to come out and protest. What else do they have to have their voices raised? What else can they do?
Ms. Chaudhary, let me ask an uncomfortable question at this point. And obviously you're not government, but I want you to answer as an observer. Does it feel like in order to keep the people who are middle class, upper middle class, maybe the rich safe, we are at this point sacrificing the poor as if they were collateral damage, where on a daily basis we hear of death, we hear of starvation, we hear of destruction, and people are just moving past as if, this is the price to pay to keep India safe from COVID. Are we going to, at the end of this, lose more people to the measures taken to prevent or to contain COVID than actually COVID?
Faye, I have maintained from day one, this is an unprecedented situation, the like of which we have never seen, the world has never seen. So nobody has been prepared for it. Every leadership in every country is coming under attack. So I have maintained that let's not be too harsh. The government didn't know what they were about. They are getting their act together. But now, as we are into the third lockdown, and this period that should have been used to prepare medically, health-wise, put things into place, systems into place, I am getting a sense that is this really happening? You have friends go to hospitals, they're turned back. There are not the beds. So there are not the protective gears. Health workers are dying. Now it's true, the numbers are huge. But I would say, have we done the very best that we could have in the given circumstances? Did we get our act together, or did we leave it Ram Bharose, as you're saying? And also this attitude, certainly of, your class and my class, middle class people you hear around. कुछ लोग तो मरेंगे. Now, you know, कुछ लोग मरेंगे, but they feel it will not be us. So let it be others who are the weaker ones, and there's a limit to which the government can do something to help, given the wherewithal that we have with us. So yes, I think, are we now going to have again a divide in India, the Bharat versus India, and the many Bharats in that India? And to also, it's very painful to see, and we are all part of this thing, that responsible for this, that even 7 decades and more after independence, the kind of images that we saw of migrants without food, the children walking, this happened during partition. I don't think there have been images like that. So yes, we are all responsible for not making a heave-ho effort. We've coexisted with this, whether it be in the media, whether in the professions, the middle class, the government, state and center, all that, yeah. So we've got to ask
Are
very
you
tough
surprised,
questions.
Ms. Chowdhury, are you surprised by the lack of heave-ho with this gas leak as well?
I think, it's, yeah, I agree with you, the responsibility of the company. The government, yeah, the chief minister has announced 1 crore to the families of the affected. But, it goes beyond that 1 crore. As a country, do you react and say, no, this is not going to? You have to pay up for this. And that payment and compensation is not only to the families affected. This is going to be for all those who've not died. And the medical facility, the checkups that will have to be done, the systemic rectification that will need to be put into place. So I think if the government is tough, and of course in 1984, the previous panelists talked about it, that Warren Anderson was arrested for a few hours. And then after 4 or 5 hours, because of pressure from the top, he was allowed to go and he could escape to the US, and no successive government extradited him or even made serious attempts to extradite him and make him face trial. So I think overall we've given that impression of Indian life being cheap, and it isn't cheap.
Well, we have, and we're going to just wait for Ms. Nandi's lights to come back on, but this is also an illustration of how everyone's living in India right now and how easily these things are to trip up on us. But we have our third guest joining us at this point. Mr. Gali Nataraja is a journalist out of Hyderabad. Mr. Nataraja, we understand today that there was a protest that took place outside of the LG plant because villagers around just felt that there wasn't any justice being served. Would you be able to tell us if the police has made any progress in their investigation and if we're any closer to understanding what went wrong?
Hi, D'Souza. He regrets for joining this talk a little bit late. So just I would like to tell you the scenes witnessed in Visakhapatnam, just they were reminiscent of Bhopal gas tragedy. So after this incident, the safety issues, particularly industrial safety, has come to the fore. See, in the last 10 years, nearly 4 or 5 accidents took place. June 13, 2012, some explosion in Visakhapatnam steel plant, 19 people were killed. August 23rd, 2013, fire accident in HPCL refinery, 27 deaths took place. See, January 6, 2013, fire accident at a hetero drugs facility, 2 persons killed. December 27, 2019, a mishap in Smilax lab in Pharma City, 2 persons were killed. See, all these accidents highlight the need for an industrial audit safety. That is essential. So, Visakhapatnam happens to be the industrial crown of Andhra Pradesh. So, there is no other industrial hub, major hub other than Visakhapatnam. So, we need industries. At the same time, we need people's safety also. See, here, as Madam Neerja just now said, see, compensation has to be paid by whom? Is it the government? Is it the taxpayer? So, government, it is a responsibility of the government to ensure that payment is made by the people who have committed the crime. So, 1 crore compensation was given to the victims each by the government. but there was no assurance, categorical assurance from the government saying that we will penalize we will bring the people who are responsible for this tragedy to book. So there is no categorical assurance from the chief minister or from the government. So also, see, two major issues took place in the last 2017 to 2020. 2017, at the time, TDP government was there. Some land alienation took place. So in favor of this LG polymers. See, that land belongs to endowment department. Endowment department put it under prohibition list. So some top officials from the CMO pressurized the endowment officials to delete this land, particular piece of land from the prohibited list, pressurized the endowment department and ensured alienation. That happened in 2017 during the TDP government. Just after Jagan Mohan Reddy came to power in May, he was sworn in as CM in May, and in June, see, the company, the corporate company was permitted for expansion. So all this happened is both, there is a clear-cut nexus between the government, whoever may be in power, the nexus between the corporates and the government. So particularly, people have been put to a lot of hardship. So there must be some kind of lasting measures. Also, so there is a need to have an in-depth study on the long-term implications of the this gas leak on public health. Okay, see, some instant measures are being taken place. See, extending compensation to the victims, evacuating people from that localities to safer places. At the same time, see, apart from extending instant relief, there is a need to look upon some long-term health implications. And the medical cost has to be borne by the company itself. See, whatever the cost that will take place in the long run. And also, there is a need to shift these industries, harmful industries, away from residential areas. Immediately, that has to take place.
Yes, actually, very, very well said. The fact that the compensation being announced by the chief minister and the state government, while some people thought it was a good move, it's effectively the taxpayer that's paying for a mistake that this company has made. So why hasn't the compensation come from the company? There's been no attachment of responsibility at all whatsoever, no commitment from the government that this responsibility, we will find out what went wrong and who was responsible, and the long-term health care of those who are impacted. Who's going to pick up the bill, and how are we going to get them to do that? I want to bring Ms. Karuna Nundy back again. I do understand that her power has gone out, so she's suffering both the heat and the lack of light. But I want her comment on this because it's so important. Ms. Nundy, the idea of naming someone in the FIR, and we've had a couple of people who popped up saying, how can we expect an investigation to wrap up in one day? You did say that because the people weren't picked up, booked, and then let out on bail, there is an actual lacuna in this investigation. And it already suggests that it's not going to be strong enough, because LG's response was wishy-washy today, and it didn't actually explain what went wrong.
You know, the thing is that an FIR is only, what does FIR stand for? It stands for First Information Report. And that is what triggers an investigation. When you have a cognizable offense, you have to register an FIR. As per the constitutional bench in the Supreme Court in Lalita Kumari, you don't have an option. When you know who the immediate managers were, when you know up the line who was responsible, why would you not make sure that an investigation, that these people are named and arrests happen and the investigation occurs properly? Now, we also saw a situation where the police commissioner said really, really early on that styrene is not a poisonous gas, right? Now, he may be right. But then why are we seeing these visuals of all these people dying? Why are we seeing about 200 people in hospital? Why were there these terrible pictures of livestock as well, suffering and dying? So was it a byproduct that was released? Was it, did the styrene morph into a different chemical altogether? We don't know enough. And I see, also, I mean, the reason I'm so glad that you are covering this, but I see also in otherwise responsible media clamping down and not saying very much about what is a terrifying disaster. Now, the thing is that if this happened in South Delhi and South Bombay, the reaction would be very different, because it would affect the people who are in power. Because Currently, we don't know. Also, let us keep in mind whether LG Polymers has donated to the party in power at the state government or in the central government, because nobody knows through the electoral bonds, which parties are getting money from which companies, right? In terms of transparency, I think it is fundamental for this probe to be monitored judicially, for there to be independent experts, not just independent scientific experts from the IITs, but also experts in forensic accounting, looking at who made these decisions. Why was, when you knew a shutdown is going to happen, when you knew that there are these massive tanks full of chemicals, when you knew that the summer is approaching, right? Why did you not do something about it?
Yes.
So let us be really clear that the standard is not negligence. We are seeing a whitewash. The government committee is looking for negligence completely contrary to law. The standard is absolute liability. And if you don't have that absolute liability, every single factory which deals in hazardous substances is incentivized to not take proper safety precautions. And, country folk are in danger already we are expropriating lives for the benefit of the rich at the moment on multiple levels.
Ms. Chowdhury, a very important point, and we must accept that the media has not been as vociferous as it should have been about this matter. The police have not named anyone. The government has not really been vocal about going after. I mean, again, soft statements of, oh, our hearts go out and our condolences is obviously not enough, because these villagers have come out onto the street today. Central and state government, again, not being very committal. But I want to go back to what you said. There is a lockdown. There are chemicals in various containers in factories across the country that are probably morphing or converting into other chemicals because of the heat and because of lack of attention, because factories are locked down. How important is it for the government to drive home the point in this particular case so that other factories are more careful? Given also that labor laws are being changed right now to not ensure safety anymore.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And that is the worrying part of it. The rights that were there for the workers are not going to be there tomorrow, what was there today and yesterday. But, I agree for the government to ensure liability and accountability, which includes arrest plus compensation and adequate compensation. And that compensation should not be a one-time payment, because you may have the health of these children affected for their lifetimes. And therefore, I think a medical team needs to study what is going to be the impact. Everybody is talking, is it poisonous? Not. I think you need credible information on that by a medical group. Number two, what worries me exactly the question that you are putting. What is the government doing today to make sure other LGs do not happen? They are probably waiting to happen. Has any instruction gone out from the center, from the state to companies like this? And if you take this kind of an attitude, wish it away and downplay it, then, for the others also, people say, we will get away with it. And thirdly, the media, Faye, I was quite surprised and stunned to see, I thought more information will be there on the gas leak on the front pages of the paper. Instead, I find in several of the papers, it's been relegated to the inside pages. A dozen people dying, a gas leak of the kind you have in the midst of COVID. And to be relegated on day 2 to the inside pages. This didn't happen earlier.
Yes, and we must all remember, for everyone who's at home right now thinking this is not happening to me, let me point out there are factories in the middle of every single big city in India. Every single big city has chemical containers. We have factories in Mumbai. We have huge refineries sitting inside city limits. And this is personal then for everybody, because when it's in your air, children collapsed inside of their homes. People collapsed on the roads. This is not something that we can pretend didn't happen, because how we respond to this actually will lead to what happens next. I want to bring in, I want to bring in Mr. Nataraja on this. Do you believe that the initial response or the lack of response from state, center, and police, Mr. Nataraja, suggests that this is also going to be hushed up, covered up, quieting down over the next couple of years?
See, there has been a clear sign of mistrust from government side right from the beginning. See, initially, the Visakhapatnam Municipal Corporation chairperson, Srujana, she clearly told the media that they mishandled the situation. Some unskilled workers on the plant, they mishandled the opening of this thing, leading to gas leak. So next time, immediately police commissioner said it in a different way, contrasting way. And the chief minister, say almost he held a brief for the company saying that it is a good reputed company, much before investigation team gets into the job. So this we are seeing in this Visakhapatnam incident. Earlier, what we have seen in Bhopal gas tragedy issue, see, we failed to extradite that Anderson from his native country to India for trial. So he died in his native country itself. So ultimately what is happening is, see, we are having a lot of distrust how the government is functioning. So when it comes to the people's safety. So given this, see, people, there is hardly anything to believe the government that the victims will get justice.
And Mr. Nataraja, is this a state government subject or a central government subject so that our audience understands it better? We seem to have lost his connection. Ms. Nundy is back. Ms. Nundy, is this a state government subject or a central government subject? Who should we looking to for responsibility?
It's both, actually. Under the Environmental Protection Act, the central government very much has responsibility as well, and as does the state government. And the coordination is something that should have happened. We see the central government completely silent, actually, at the moment, because they don't want to associate themselves from anything that is, anything that is negative. And why there is also, let me add, a regulatory failure. Now we see, Neelam Sani, I think her name is the chief secretary, coming up with all sorts of ideas about how regulation should be improved. What about the regulation earlier? What was going on then? Let us remember that in 1982 in Bhopal, 12 people were hospitalized. There are various warning signs. This may even be a sign of a larger thing too, a larger disaster from the same factory. So this laxity is something that honestly absolutely amazes me. And the relative silence that we see in the media, the almost complete silence, the complete silence that we see from the central government, the fact that the committees are looking for negligence. Now, this to me seems, it's too obvious to not be malafide, according to me. Why are you looking for negligence? The standard is clear, absolute liability.
Yes, I don't know how much of what Mr. Nataraja said you caught, Ms. Nundy. He basically talked about how there were conflicting sort of statements that came from municipal commissioner, then police commissioner, then state government that almost held a brief for the company and said, no, this is a very reputed company. Obviously, when someone as powerful as chief minister makes a statement like that, you're already pointing your investigating agency in a certain direction. You're almost publicly giving sort of a hint as to how you want this investigation to go. A lot of this, I know for you and for Ms. Chowdhury, is reminiscent of what happened in Bhopal. It reminds us of what happened in Bhopal. And we should also remind our audience that for the citizens who were killed and injured and gravely hurt in that gas leak in Bhopal, they were fighting for 20 years after.
Are still fighting. Because you know what happened there? Is the government took over the claims and settled for an absolutely measly paltry amount. Now, we have all succeeded in reopening that case. But it's a huge, huge battle. Because you know what? The people who got sick in that tragedy, they have, for example, Rashida B, who's one of our petitioners, and she got the Goldman Prize herself. She got the Green Nobel. But 8 of her immediate family died of so-called cancer, right? Most of them got 25,000 rupees each. There are people with, who are not menstruating, can't have children. There are children and grandchildren who are incredibly sick, and those settlements are not being made. So the fact that it's not just 12 people, it's 200 people that were admitted to hospital. It's the children that might be born with genetic defects. We don't know enough. And are we going to know enough? Because is anyone even looking into it? Yes. We are not so far from the golden hour of evidence now that they can't still get their act together. And it's vital.
Yes. Last question to Ms. Neerja Chowdhury. Ms. Chowdhury, what statements would you want to hear from state and central governments at this point to indicate that they're serious about this?
I think make sure that the company pays adequate compensation. I also am very interested in who's going to fight the legal case on behalf of these affected people, of those who've died. Is the government taking responsibility for all this? I remember at the time of the Bhopal gas leak, the issue was given to the CBI. It's another matter that a few hours later, Warren Anderson was released because pressure came from the US. At that time, it used to be said that government was under pressure from the US government. And Mr. Arjun Singh, who was the chief minister at that time, has written in his book that he got a call from the Home Secretary at the time that to release Anderson, which is what was done. So we know how governments work. So what you would like today is adequate compensation to be paid by the company, not just the government. You're absolutely right. Otherwise, it's you and I who are paying. You and I should also help. That's another matter. I would say legal help to go immediately. I would say long-term relief and tracking the health of, I'm particularly concerned about the younger children who've been exposed to this gas leak, who may face a lifetime of problems. And yes. Certainly, I would say a clear instruction to other LGs to get their act together. And you know, Karuna have pointed to a very important thing. Is this a warning? Could it be a foretaste of a bigger thing? Other things going wrong in the companies, the company LG taking corrective steps, that a bigger disaster is not waiting to happen. I don't want to be, you know, sensationalist, but because human lives are at stake, we are in the midst of lockdowns. It's very unprecedented circumstances, so we've got to take it seriously. Right. And the impression we are getting is that the government is not taking it seriously.
Right, and seriously I also want to point out to the National Green Tribunal having slapped an interim penalty of 50 crore rupees on LG Polymers India and asked responses from from the central government and others for damaging life, public health, and environment. Mr. Nundy, what can we read out of this NGT 50 crore penalty?
I think it's fine, but I think it's welcome actually, but one would want to make sure that the victims' voices are there and that they are personally represented. And, you know, even in the media, honestly, I didn't hear very much from the victims themselves. I can understand why the villagers are coming out to protest, because what was reported was what the police commissioner said and what the state chief minister has done, and that was extensively reported. Now we're hearing from the chief secretary. Why are we not hearing from the victims? What actually happened? We're hearing from people's tweets saying that their hearts are broken. Fine, you know, completely understandable. But what about justice? What about the lives of these actual people, you know?
Right. So let me take that question to Mr. Nataraja, who is a journalist on the ground in Andhra and Telangana. Mr. Nataraja, why do you believe there wasn't more extensive reporting of the stories of the victims? And we know this is commonplace as journalists. Both of us are journalists. We know that day 2 is when you go to the families and you ask them what happened. And we didn't see too much of that happen. Also, as a straight up question, how important is a company like LG for the state government of Andhra Pradesh right now?
See, really not only LG, see, any industry is important for government after state bifurcation, particularly Andhra Pradesh, last state capital Hyderabad, after bifurcation, and Hyderabad is a hub of industries earlier before bifurcation. Now, see, after bifurcation, Andhra Pradesh aimed to become sunrise state with a focus on industries. During Naidu period also, a lot of investments took place, investment summits took place in Visakhapatnam, so attracting foreign investors and investors from within the country. So at the same time, see, what we need is not only industry, as I said earlier, that we must have industrial safety also. And now Jagan Mohan Reddy government, unfortunately, is trying to shift the capital from Amravati to Visakhapatnam. After it is clear that Visakhapatnam is no longer a safe zone. As I said, in a series of accidents in the last 7 to 10 years, more than 30 people were killed. So there was no industrial safety audit, and Visakhapatnam is no longer a safe zone. So in spite of that, Reddy government is trying to shift capital to Visakhapatnam. See, it is high time to drop his capital proposal to Visakhapatnam, keeping in mind public safety. See, already, Visakhapatnam is a major city, and if you take capital to Hyderabad, the Visakhapatnam, there will be more, people adding to the city. So rising safety concerns. So government should keep it in mind. At the same time, see, this culpability of the LG company is beyond any doubt. See, Supreme Court, there is a clear judgment is there. What it says? See, absolute liability lies in the company when this kind of gas leak takes place from plant premises. That is clear. So in spite of this tangible culpability on the part of the corporate company, it is very unfortunate that the government strongly influencing the investigating teams much before investigation begins, saying that it is a good reputed company. So nothing sort of this took place in the past. This kind of statements, definitely it will influence the investigating agencies.
Yes. All right, I'm going to leave this here, but I just want to put into a nutshell for our viewers who might have just joined late what we've gathered. Now, Mr. Nataraja, who is a journalist in Hyderabad, pointing out that there is culpability of the company in question, that there has been wishy-washy sort of statements and contradictory statements from the city commissioner and the police commissioner, the state government almost batting for the company here and offering compensation from state coffers, which we should keep reminding ourselves is our money, it's taxpayer money. Instead of taking money from the company that's responsible, there's no clear commitment to finding out what went wrong, who was responsible, and making sure those people face criminal proceedings. Remember, that's the important part. Because there are factories in every one of our cities, because we're all living next to factories. Look up, look out, you will find one. It's important to actually attach responsibility. Ms. Karuna Nundy pointing out that this is the beginning, step 1, step 2, to burying this over the long term. And it's important to learn from the mistakes we made as citizens in the Bhopal gas incident and make sure it doesn't happen again. And Ms. Neerja Chowdhury pointing out how the onslaught of COVID as a virus is actually causing us to devalue lives of our fellow citizens. Remember that our constitution tells us that we are all equal. Every single Indian citizen is equal. So from the baby who inhaled poisonous gas in Vizag to the baby who died on the road, walking the highways, my baby, all babies are equal in this country. And we seem to have lost sight of that in an attempt to keep ourselves safe. How we react while state governments now sacrifice the safety of migrants, sacrifice the safety of laborers in factories in order to boost their economics will make or break the country we become. This is not who we are. And this is not what our founding parents intended for us to be as a country. We need to stand up for what we believe in right now. I want to thank my panelists for joining me on this conversation, and we will continue to keep a close eye and bring you reports of what's happening with the continued investigation in Vizag. For now, thanks for watching and good night.